You're listening to Raven, the talk show made on Women Talk Radio.
You unstoppable woman, it's your time to shine. Woman, women, turn your life around. Girl, you got the power, there's no you can't achieve. Can't nobody stop you if you believe.
Welcome to Women Power Talk Radio, the show that's designed for the boomer woman in mind and the men who love them. Hi, this is Raven Blair Davis. I'm the host of the show, and I thank you so much for coming back and joining us once again. You know, Women Power Talk Radio is for the woman like me, yes, just like me, who wants more out of life, and they're determined to get it. So each week we bring you unstoppable women of power to come on and encourage, inspire, and empower you to stop settling. You know, open that dream circle back up and unleash the greatness that you have within. And when I think of unstoppable women, this lady is at the top of the list, I kid you not. The person I am so delighted to bring to you today is someone you've seen on TV, and I'm sure, just like me, you absolutely loved watching her. Her name, Lindsay Wagner. Lindsay is a talented actress best known for her role as Jamie Summers, yes, the Bionic Woman, and the girlfriend of the Bionic Man, who was played, of course, by Lee Majors. Lindsay, that's not all that she's done. She's done several different other acting roles, and she's going to talk to us about some of the things she's done in the past today. But you know what? She has a new CD out, and I'm going to let her surprise you with this at the end. It's called Open to Oneness. She's going to share with you about this CD and what she's doing now that I know my boomer women listeners are going to love. And that's why I asked her to come here, because it's not so much about what she was doing then, even though it was great, but it's about what she's doing now that affects each and every one of us, that's going to change your life and help you get unstuck, help you to start living a fulfilled, stress-free, rewarding life. So without further ado, I'm so excited to have Lindsay Wagner. Hey, Lindsay.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Well, thank you for coming. We appreciate you taking out time to share with the Women Power listeners.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I know a lot of them have missed you and missed seeing you on TV, so I'm just going to go ahead and let you start there. For all your fans, we want to make sure they feel satisfied this morning hearing from Lindsay Wagner, the Bionic Woman.
Yeah.
At what age did you begin your acting career, Lindsay, and was it always a dream of yours?
Well, that's kind of a funny story and maybe a slightly unusual. I started studying acting when I was 13.
Ooh, okay.
Okay, so this is girl to girl here. That buzzing in the background is my dryer.
Okay.
I started studying acting when I was 13, and it wasn't because I had any interest in acting. It actually was a form of, well, I should say covert therapy, if you will. These people that I used to babysit for, he was an acting teacher, coach, and she was a ballerina and had children, and so she'd given up, mostly was teaching dancing then. And my family had, like many families, a lot of things that they were struggling through at the time. And the things that were going on was causing me and our family's inability at the time to be able to express ourselves. It just was all kind of bottled up in me. And these two lovely people that I used to work for as a babysitter when I was 13 just saw how emotionally kind of hidden and locked up I was, kind of knew our family was going through a lot of struggles. And so they wanted to give me an outlet, because I was working all the time trying to help support my family and then, of course, going to school as a kid and whatnot. So they kind of just took me under their wing. I mean, of course, I knew all this in retrospect, but at the time, I just thought they were really nice and were asking me to come into their art classes. We didn't have people in the arts in my family, so through that journey, I learned the importance of art and self-expression, and how meaningful that is to your whole being. It's not just something about the movies. It's not just something about stage. It's something that I think every human being needs in one form or another. It's either music or acting or something, writing.
Dance or something.
Yeah, that's a real important part of our beingness. So anyway, they took me under their wing and took me into the acting class. So it kind of started like that, and it was like a duck to water because I was so kind of ashamed, if you will, of my emotions and my feelings that this gave me an excuse to let them out because it was somebody else. It wasn't my feelings. It was I was acting, So as a kid, it was my first entrance into really just letting myself go. And what happened as a result was that I saw people getting something from it. I saw that my feelings that I used to think were, something that I should hide, my so-called negative feelings, my sadness, my, ache, my whatever, that was being put into these roles he would give me, other people would watch, and they would have this positive response. Whereas I always thought my feelings were just like a burden and whatnot, So that was the beginning of really a deep awakening for me. It took, quite a while and a lot of other things in my life. But that's actually how I came to acting. And I happen to have a natural propensity for it, although I think kids are very good at it. But, Jimmy said you just have such a natural ability with it that you could do this when you get older. But he was very wise and told me not to. He really was guiding me to not do it until I got much older and felt like I was pretty well balanced, out on my own, more grown up, because he said it's a tough world and it can really mess with your mind when you go in there if you're not pretty balanced. And by the grace of God, I listened. And so I didn't take opportunities that I had as a young person to go into it. I guess I had such respect for him that as a kind of a mentor, that I listened, and I think it served me very well. And I asked him at that time, I said, well, when should I go? And he said, you'll know. You'll know. If you just keep listening to your heart, you'll know. I said, okay. And so that was when I was 13, 14, and then my parents, we moved for a couple of years, came back to California. And when I was 22, I literally, Raven, one morning I woke up. I swear it was just like somebody turned a switch, and I went, I'm ready. And a friend of mine who was, when we were young, lived in the same apartment building, and I was studying. He used to come watch the shows we put on, and he was working at Universal Studios in the mailroom at the time. And he was always saying, when are you going to start? You were so good. I loved watching you doing that, blah, blah, blah. And I finally, I called him that morning when I woke up. I said, Pete, because now he's working at a studio, right? He had the interest only from the executive end of it. And I think I'm ready, maybe I'd like to try doing that. And he just said, oh, Lindsay. And I said, what? He said, we're in the middle of an actor's strike. Could you think of anything?
You felt it right in the middle of an actor's strike. Wow.
Well, when things are meant to be, I guess they're meant to be because there was, he called me back later and he said, why don't you just come in and start reading for the casting directors so that you can get used to doing this because you're going to have to do a lot of this. And I said, okay, I'll do whatever. I had no agent, no nothing. I went in and he just, because they were on strike, the casting directors at Universal were on salary. They worked exclusively for Universal. So they had to come into work anyway, and there really wasn't anything for them to do, but they show up and earn their paycheck. And so he went around and asked them, and they said, okay, sure, send her in, whatever. So I went in and read for a couple of them, and literally the next day, they called from the studio, and Pete was calling me also and said, this is the craziest thing that Marcus Welby do you remember Marcus Welby, MD? It was an old series. I don't know.
Oh, I love Marcus Welby, yeah.
Huh? Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Oh,
okay.
yeah, absolutely. That was your first role.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They had gotten an exemption from the union to finish the show that they had started just as the strike went on. And there was a part of a private nurse in a hospital that was only about, 6 lines, 8 lines. And they wanted me to come in and play this part. not because I was a non-union member, because it was a union show. So I called Pete and I said, Pete, what am I going to do? And he said, well, you need an agent. You're going to have to sign a contract and blah. So he introduced me to somebody, and I signed an agent. And so from the day that I called him, 3 days later, I was filming it.
My goodness, that was quick.
And after that happened, the dailies were watched by the people at the studio who had still contract players then.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really do that anymore. That was kind of the tail end of that contract players system. And they called after the dailies were shown the next day, because she was always looking at who was in what, and the woman who ran that department, and called and asked me if I'd come in and talk to her. And so I did. And another couple of days went by, and I was under contract to the studio, and I didn't stop working for, so it was really odd. Compared to the normal story.
Yeah, it really is odd, but that just shows you that when the time is right, things will happen and doors will open for you. So your mentor was smart to tell you to wait, obviously.
Yeah, and in essence, he was talking about having your whole self aligned.
Mm-hmm.
You have the talent to go out and do this right now, but psychologically, emotionally, he didn't use the word spiritual, but I know that knowing him and certain things, the way he talked about things, to me, those were spiritual issues.
Right.
Having yourself really grounded in peace and whatnot, and getting yourself healthy in a holistic way was, to me, about that body-mind-spirit connection.
Mm. So. And let's see, right after that was about when, what was it, the Bionic Woman came?
No, I did a lot of episodic, about 13 episodic guest starring things for the studio in all the different series that they had. And then Robert Wise hired me in my first motion picture about 6 months later, which was called Two People. And then the movie The Paper Chase came right after that.
Paper Chase, okay, yeah.
And then is when I started getting a little, the studio and I were not kind of seeing where I wanted to go the same way. I mean, I was under contract to them, but I wanted to continue doing films. I had these 2 really nice features under my belt, so to speak, and they wanted me to keep doing just the television stuff, because as I subsequently learned, one of the reasons that they had these contract players was because they paid us a small salary, but then when they would put us in a show, they would charge themselves a large amount of money. And so they would make the money on the salary. They would charge themselves for me, and we'd get our like much smaller salary, which was fair. I mean, they were helping us to build a career. But when it came time to elaborate on the career that seemed to be moving forward for me, which was into the feature area, they just wanted to keep using me in TV. So, and not in a way that would really grow me. It was more just like they had a product, right? And they wanted to keep it in line with what they were doing financially. So we kind of went round and round, and about a year went by, and I did a couple things, the Rockford Files pilot and other things.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the stuff I was kind of
Rockford Files,
choosing to not do. And so we kind of got tired of each other in that sense. It was like, okay, this relationship isn't going where I want it, and I said, well, it's not going where I want it. And about that time, the very last thing they asked me to do before my contract was up was this starring in the episode of something called The $6 Million Man, which I had never seen, and I didn't even own a television at the time. And so I read it, and I wasn't much of a sci-fi person, and I knew really nothing about it. And I read it, and so first of all, not being a sci-fi person, not ever having seen the show, you can imagine reading one of those scripts if you're like a very dramatic actress, and it's like, what am I reading? And I was talking to my mom on the phone after I'd gotten this request from them in the script, and it was kind of interesting, and I said to my mom, this is a really strange show. And she said, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? She said, the $6 million, they want you to be the Bionic Woman. I said, well, yeah, but they're jumping off of buildings and doing all this weird stuff. I mean, it's kind of weird. And she said, Lindsay, that's your sister's favorite show. Well, my sister's 14 years younger than me. And I was 25 at the time, so, do the math. And she was, that's your sister's favorite show. How can you not do that? And you have to do that. Well, I looked at the paper, the cover letter that came with the script, And the start date of the show was my sister's birthday. And I went, oh, man, if that's not a sign hitting me right between the eyes.
That was it. Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, I'll do this as a birthday present for my little sister. So I did it. And then I left the studio, and they, I was off my way, and I ended up in Canada doing another feature, and they aired it. And that's when the public just went crazy. It's like, how could you develop on this show, which is kind of like the quintessential father figure, right? Mm-hmm. For our older generations, it was Superman. You don't kill Superman, right? And not in front of kids anyway. Mm-hmm. And here they had the $6 million man who was this generation's
hero, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and role model and whatnot. And then they created the female counterpart, so you got the quintessential mother figure, if you will. And then they killed her off right at the end of the story. Well, the letters were just flooding into the network about the irresponsible programming and how the kids were upset and traumatized and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was a big thing. And so here I am in Canada, and they're like calling me like crazy, and my agent's calling me saying, they want you to come back to the studio. I said, I'm not going back to the studio. And they said, no, really, you got to go back. And then they told me what was happening. And so, oh, that's terrible. And so I ended up going back and doing another two-parter so that they could bring her back to life. And at the end of that two-part episode, which again was not intended to be a series, it was just to bring her back to life and kind of, let the kids know she was okay. And by the end of it, she was going to go teach school, and they were turning down her bionics. And so she was out of the way of the series because it wasn't part of the series formula, and yet everybody knew she was all right. So then I went off, and what was I? I don't know. I was doing something else. Again, the audience went berserk, and the network called and said, we got to make this thing a series.
We'll make it happen.
And that's what happened.
Mm. Well, you know what? You did really good jumping off those buildings, girl. You jumped off those buildings with some class and style. Wow, that is great. And then, of course, things just kind of blossomed from that, because I know you've done a few things. Was it on Lifetime or some TV?
Oh, I did 40 television movies and 5 series and 7 features, and, it was just a whole huge amount of work once that was over. The movies for me, as well as the Bionic Woman, because the deal that I made with them when that opportunity presented itself was that I could have some creative control, and that they would work with me on stories, because what I didn't want to do with the Bionic Woman was be a man in a dress walking around punching people because I was physically strong. It was really important to me that the stories be developed with other uses for the bionics, with that stories included conflict resolution instead of just might ends up being right, that we show good guys and bad guys that are normally black and white stories. You're good, you're bad, and it's just that always infuriated me, because it doesn't show human nature. To me, I was into wanting to express human nature, and we all think we're doing the right thing most of the time when we're doing it, even if it's incredibly wrong. But there's some motivation inside the person. It isn't just because I'm bad. I'm on the other side of this conflict, and I have my needs and desires and wishes and fears just like you do. But we tend to look at everything so egocentric that then even in stories, when they get written, oftentimes they aren't written with the understanding that everybody's struggling. And that time it was the Cold War, and so our enemy was Russia. So a lot of the stories encompass that. And I just refused to do the stories written the way it's always easy to write a story. And I was constantly encouraging the writers and the producers to, come on, take it deeper, take it deeper. I mean, yeah, we have a franchise. We do have to live it out. But you can show them as human beings who really feel that they're doing the right thing for their country just like we are. And
just step out on the ledge a little bit.
So, and people often, so anyway, we went through lots of conversations like that and struggles. And so we got a lot of things done. At that time, the Native American community, literally, about that time, had just been given the right to practice their own religion in this country by law. I mean, when you think about how insane that was in our lifetime, this country that was founded on the freedom of religion, that, and it wasn't until the 70s that the Native American community was given that same freedom. And so we did a show where Charlie Hill, the Native American comedian who was also an actor, he came on the show and did an episode in which we showed him communicating with his ancestors in a traditional way. And so a lot of things we put in the show without sacrificing the fun of it, and I think actually made it even more fun, because then if you can't use all these bionics for battle, what are we going to use them for? So that's where we came up with working with kids and doing funny things in the classroom and opening cans with my finger and cleaning house and just trying to make it fun as well.
And the kids enjoyed it.
Yeah. So that was a real important thing for me. And as I left the Bionic Woman and went on to do the television movies, I didn't transition into features, although I had the opportunity at that time, because the television world was letting me do whatever I wanted to do. I was so popular that they were allowing me to do stories about, naturopathic medicine and, child abuse and spousal abuse and all these kinds of subjects that were never allowed to be touched on television because it's all sponsor-driven, and they didn't want to upset the sponsors with anything too controversial. And I wanted to do things that were meaningful to people as well as entertaining. And they were just afraid of it. But my Q was so high that they let me try a few. And they found that it worked, and people tuned in, and they loved it. And, I always think the networks are underestimating the audience. And so that was kind of my struggle from there on. And ended up, it was just a huge flow of over the next 10 years. I did like 40 films,
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, they always say that the audience knows what they want and give them what they want. So kudos for you, Lindsay, in speaking up and letting them know when they needed to, be a little bit more controversial, give the viewers more of what you felt that they needed and less of the other, because some people don't speak up and they continue going down the same path. So it takes a lot of courage to do that.
Yeah, I was just a kid. I mean, really, but it doesn't matter. I think that part of our spirit is there, and it doesn't always get nurtured. And I'm not even sure really where it, kind of where it came in from me, other than my grandmother was a strong woman, and my mom, even in her own way, had that kind of fire. And so, though we weren't good at expressing our emotions, there was permission, if you will, on an intellectual level to speak up in my family for the women. And
so you inherited that talent.
and I kind of ran with that one, I guess.
That's good. Are we going to see you on TV again anytime soon?
I don't know. I haven't formally quit or anything. It's not like that. It's just that I have transitioned over to my to the workshops that I'm doing. Yeah. When TV became when cable came in, we went from a well-balanced 3 networks throughout the history of television to 100 overnight.
Yeah.
And so the whole demographics were just completely shattered, and the networks didn't know what their personality was or who their audience was anymore, and so they were just scrambling to stay alive and pulling people any way they could, which equated at that time to more violence, more sex, and nothing that fit into anything I wanted to do. And, so I kind of pulled back for a while, actually in the year 2000 or 99, whatever it was, right around there. I just said, well, I'm going to take about a year and a half off. I gave myself, because I had been working so much up to that point that I decided to take some time off. And what was happening in me as an individual was I was growing even more, going through my healing processes, my own expansion, and I wanted to communicate even more openly with people than ever before, and my playground or my venue in which I'd had the opportunity to do that through the movies that I did was getting more narrow. So I was getting broader, wanting to say more, and the channel was getting smaller at that time. And because the kinds of films I did were just not the things people wanted to take a chance on, because somebody else was doing something really like that never been done. Like violence over here on this new network, and everybody was gaga-eyeing at the sets on this one and the things. I mean, it's just the topography was like the Big Bang all over again. So I pulled back and took some time off, did a lot more of my own interpersonal work, and just spent even more time with my kids. And it was a wonderful 2 years. And then I found myself a couple years later still feeling like I just didn't feel that pull to go back there. And what I ended up doing at that time was going in and working in the L.A. County Jail with domestic violence offenders. A friend of mine had started a healing program, or a recovery program for the men who had been incarcerated for battering. And I started then a nonprofit, so I worked a little bit in the jail with that program, but I also started a support group for when he came out and the families were reuniting and coming back together again. James Beard and I, a man who's still teaching in the jail, we co-facilitated these groups with the families coming back together again. And it was really wonderful.
We'll be right back right after this commercial break.
Life can bring pain. Sometimes it seems unbearable. Hi, my name is Judah Myers. I was conceived when 8 men attacked my mother. I, too, have felt my share of pain. But my mother and I have chosen to forgive and live free from the past. Research shows that 87% of all illnesses are caused from toxic thinking. Are you suffering from past offenses? Learn to forgive any offense and live free. Find this and more in my new book, Hostile Conception, Living with Purpose. Step-by-step instructions, along with other stories of freedom in forgiving, will help you to forgive any offense. Go to www.judamyers.com or any bookstore to order your copy of Hostile Conception, Living with Purpose by Judah Myers.
Judah Myers is available internationally for speaking and singing. For more information, go to www.judahmyers.com.
This is Sarah Zeldman from SolutionsForBusyMoms.com. Shh, don't tell Raven. I'm not 40 yet, but I love Women Power Talk Radio because I want to be an unstoppable woman of power, too.
My goodness, Lindsay, this has been such an interesting interview. Just hearing all the things that you've done from the beginning of your acting career, amazing. And I know you're doing a lot of holistic things right now. I'm just curious, how long have you had that passion?
I've been studying holistic health and counseling, all of that, my whole life. I wanted to be, when I was a young woman, I really wanted to be a counselor. More than an actor, but I was dyslexic and I couldn't get through college. They didn't have the kind of help they have for it now. They didn't understand it. And so it was just, I tried for a little while to go to college and it was just too hard. I just couldn't get through the academic system. If you could just tell me everything, I could remember it and learn it, and boom, I was there with you, right back even in a debate about it. But I had trouble accessing from the page, and now they know how to help people, get through that whole issue. But
yeah, I had read that, and I was like, wow, okay, well, she's definitely that.
Well, what I did was I kept studying on my own, at my own pace, all those years, because that really was, the human potential. Human potential is my passion. So I continued to study it, and was counseling for a long time, kind of under the radar. And then I found myself working with this jail program that a friend of mine starting a nonprofit. And so it just kind of was evolving as I had taken time off from the industry. And it just hasn't stopped. It just like I turned a corner, and here I've been going down this road for the last 10 years now.
Well, I had read on your website that you are a huge advocate, Lindsay, for human potential. And I want to have you explain to our listeners what exactly human potential is. And did that passion, was that very deep, or as soon as you got out of acting, you just realized that people could do more with your experience of being down at the jail, helping the gentleman, assisting with that?
No, this has been a lifetime thing for me, because I experienced it myself. I mean, when I was young, that whole thing about me holding all my feelings in and not being able to share it with people, and, it's kind of like whatever you're holding in, that's a whole part of yourself that doesn't get, it's not that you dump it on people. There are very positive ways to learn to express yourself, and that if people learn how to listen, it's a very healing thing for someone to be able to talk about how they're feeling and someone to know how to listen, and that's how we help each other be more of who we are, because that stuff comes through. It's there, but it can be a wave. But it doesn't become a wave. It becomes illness or many other things when we try to block that wave off. It's like just try and stop the ocean during a storm, You just, seawalls really take a beating, and that's kind of what was happening to my body. I had ulcers when I was a very young woman, and I met some people who were kind of the quintessential definition of holistic practitioners, and they taught me how to do meditation and visualization, and then I worked with an MD who was also friends with them, and they and studied that same kind of holistic thinking the body, mind, and spirit required all together for genuine healing. You can take a medicine, a chemical, and you can counteract a symptom, but that isn't healing. That's putting at bay a symptom, and if the source of that symptom doesn't ever get addressed, which is mostly in the emotional field, and or spiritual misalignment, then you're something else is going to come up physically, whether it's a reoccurrence of that or some other thing. So basically, my emotions were eating their way out my stomach, and I ended up in the hospital at UCLA. I was going to be operated on, and these people helped me through learning to meditate, doing visualization for healing, and doing an extreme fast under the care of a doctor. And in 6 weeks, that was gone. And I was blown away. I said, oh my goodness, there's just like stuff that we in our mainstream have yet to wake up to. Now, this was clear back in the 60s. So that began a lifetime journey in study for me, of all kinds of. And so when you say human potential, I realized, and they helped me understand that there's no way to describe human potential because it's endless. We are an amazing bundle of potential in so many different ways, and we have access to it. And to me, it is that we have access to the potential of the divine, of this whole amazing creation. And depending on how you see things or what our language is, some people are spiritual or religious oriented, so I would say it is, God, the endless love and potential that God will send through us and to us if we open up and ask and just surrender to not trying to control everything all the time, or if one is perhaps spiritual but not religious, and you relate to the love of the cosmos and the creative energy of the divine, whatever your language is, that potential is far beyond anything that we could imagine. When you think back just to our great-grandparents, what has happened in that time? When I think about what's happened in my lifetime, so I find myself just amazed with what, even on a technical level, and sometimes we certainly get ourselves into trouble with that. But on
I see your point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a technical level, we've come so far just in my lifetime. But when I thought that I was sitting there with my grandmother, who literally spent the first 10 years of her life in a covered wagon, and I sat and watched the moon landing with her, and then I sit today and my kids, and we're talking about, when I was acting one time, there was a young actor, and they pulled out this phone and said, okay, honey, it was a young, I don't remember how old she was, 10 or something like that. And they said, go over and just dial the phone. It was a period piece set back in my lifetime. And they brought out one of those rotary phones, the round, you got to roll the circle thing. She walked over and she just looked at it. And I said, go ahead, just pick it up like you're going to call. And she picked up the receiver, and then she just looked at it. She says, what do I do? It was like, I went, okay, I know I've been on this planet for a little while now. And, the thought even of a cell phone was just something out of a weird sci-fi movie, much less Twitter.
Twitter, oh my goodness.
So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. we have potential. We tend to think of it most specifically in the physical plane, but it is every bit as extraordinary in all the other ways. When I was going to be operated by one of the best hospitals, because that's the only thing they knew to do, and these people in 6 weeks, I had no ulcer in 6 weeks by using the power of my mind, opening my heart to the love of that is in us. In my opinion, it's here. Love isn't out there. You don't get love from anybody. Love is within us, and we either open to it and accept it and embrace it, because that's a gift from God. That's our divine right.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lindsay, for coming on and sharing with us. I know you got a lot more you're going to share with us next week, so we're excited about that.
Thank you.
I want to encourage everyone to go ahead and check out your website. That's www.lindsaywagner.com. And for those international, that'd be www.lindsaywagnerinternational.com. Don't forget to come back next week and listen in for part 2 of none other than acclaimed actress Lindsay Wagner.